Hello and welcome to World News on TVP World. I'm Marie Cato. The latest version of the US-Ukraine mineral deal could undermine Kyiv's accession bid to the EU by giving Washington the first offer on reconstruction projects. So that's all according to the leaked draft of the plan obtained by Bloomberg News and reported on Friday. Our EU correspondent Angela Skujins reports from the Belgian capital on what we know about the draft and its impact so far.
International media organisation Bloomberg News is reporting on Friday that according to a leaked draft of the highly contentious US-Ukraine mineral deal, Washington wants to have first dibs on the rebuilding of serious infrastructure as well as the extraction of critical minerals. This is according to a leaked draft of the proposal obtained by that newspaper. Now, according to Bloomberg News, Washington wants to play a major role in the reconstruction of that infrastructure. We're talking about roads, railways and ports. They also want their hands on the extraction of key minerals as well as oil and gas. If approved by Ukraine, this would give Washington a major economic foothold in Europe and could potentially ostracize Ukraine from its European allies, as well as endangering its bid to join the EU. But what we know so far is that a Ukrainian official has told Reuters that it is examining this proposal from Washington with senior members of the cabinet exploring their response over the next couple of days. And while much of this deal is shrouded in mystery, we understand that the guts of this is an investment fund. Half of that money would be fronted by Washington to fund the construction of Ukraine following Russia's 3-year invasion. Half of that money would also, of course, be funded by Ukraine. So we'll have to wait and see how this deal plays out in the next coming days. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
The US State Department announced on Thursday that it would reinstate short-term funding for an initiative documenting Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. The program, run by Yale University, used biometric data and satellite imagery to track down the victims of Russia's abduction of children from Ukraine.
Yale's research, funded by the US State Department, has helped track thousands of cases of Ukrainian children being forcibly taken into Russia. Researchers reportedly lost access to the database last month after officials from the State Department terminated the contract with the university, cutting off evidence for war crimes investigations. A spokesperson for the department said the short-term funding will allow implementers of the program to ensure critical data on abducted children is properly transferred to relevant authorities. The move comes amid US President Donald Trump's administration's efforts to cut waste and fraud in various agencies.
We want to promote Polish investment and involvement of Polish business in Ukraine, said Warsaw's Deputy Minister of Funds and Regional Policy, Jan Szyszko, in an interview with TVP World. The official also spoke about signing agreements with financial partners who will provide preferential loans for Polish businesses looking to invest in or expand their operations in Ukraine as part of the country's reconstruction.
We want to promote the investments and economic activity of Polish firms in Ukraine. We know that many of them want to, but haven't had the sort of market backstops or market guarantees to invest in Ukraine. Right now, with the instrument, 250 million zlotys of preferential loans for Polish firms that are willing to invest in Ukraine, even for the first time, will be available to guarantee those investments. We know that because of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, those investments are often riskier than otherwise and in different places. So it's only natural for the state to support them or make them more attractive with an instrument. One loan can be up to 10 million zlotys, and preferential, that means up to 2% of interest. However, if there is a firm that has a history of investments in Ukraine, that interest is lower, below 2%. If it's a firm from a medical sector, which is especially needed in Ukraine, and this is a sector that we are especially interested to promote as well, then those loans are at 1%. So they're really, really preferential.
Kinga Radłowska, the head of the Center for Finance and Security at Russia Europe, recently told TVP World about the future of Russia's frozen assets and the risks related to the expiration of sanctions.
Decisive action is badly needed. What the EU can do, because just to remind, the majority of Russian central bank's assets are held in Belgium, in Europe, at Euroclear. So it's the EU that has the power to decide about the future of the frozen assets. So basically I can see only two solutions. The first solution is to confiscate those assets and make sure they benefit Ukrainian reconstruction. Another solution is that the EU creates a new vehicle, for example, a bank or an investment fund that will manage those funds more effectively, because most of those bonds, they matured now and they turned into cash. So another issue is that those assets are not invested as effectively as they could be, and the better investment on them, the better return for Ukraine's reconstruction.
Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda visited the Pabradė training area on Friday, where 4 U.S. soldiers went missing at a training exercise earlier this week. During his visit, he spoke about the challenging recovery operation, expressing hope for a miracle.
All services and institutions are working hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, not just doing their job, but striving to do it as quickly as possible. Yet the situation is entirely unique, as it's clear that a natural trap has been set there. The difficulty of the rescue efforts is evident, especially since the small barrier separating the lake from the accident site was washed away overnight. My thoughts and prayers are with the families of the soldiers, and I still hold out hope for a miracle. While many skeptics might say there is nothing to hope for in these circumstances, I choose to believe.
Poland has stepped in to support Lithuania in the search for 4 missing U.S. soldiers at a military training area in Pabradė. While media reports on Wednesday suggested they had been found dead, officials say there's no confirmation of their fate and rescue operations continue.
Lithuania's defense minister, Dovilė Šakalienė, thanked Poland, calling Warsaw's assistance a gesture of solidarity that shows her country isn't alone in the effort. On Thursday, Poland's defense chief announced an urgent deployment of a task force to Lithuania.
A task force of dozens of soldiers with heavy equipment and divers are urgently heading to Lithuania to help locate US soldiers and extract a combat vehicle. We are responding to a call from our allies.
Operations are underway in a swampy terrain where armored Hercules vehicle used by the missing soldiers was discovered in a depth of 3 to 5 meters. Crews are draining water and reinforcing the ground, aiming to allow heavy machinery to reach the site and retrieve the stuck vehicle. The 4 American soldiers disappeared on Tuesday afternoon during exercises at the Pabradė range near the Belarusian border. As of now, their status remains unknown, and search and rescue teams continue working around the clock.
In Moldova, 2 days after the detention of Eugenia Gutul, the leader of the Russian-backed autonomous region of Gagauzia, authorities have broadened their scope of their investigation. She and other Moscow-allied politicians in this country are suspected of attempting to influence last year's elections. Gutul was detained on Tuesday in connection with a corruption case involving the financing of a pro-Russian electoral bloc linked to the fugitive business magnate Ilan Shor, who was in exile in Moscow. On Thursday, another pro-Moscow politician, Alexei Lungu, was stopped at the Chisinau airport and told he could not leave the country due to his involvement in the investigations. The suspects are linked to Ilan Shor, who was sentenced to 15 years for his role in the 2014-2015 disappearance of $1 billion from Moldova's banking system. Authorities are accusing him of illegally funding efforts to influence Moldova's elections later this year. US Vice President J.D. Vance left for his controversial visit to Greenland on Friday. His trip comes as President Donald Trump continues his stance on taking control of the semi-autonomous Danish territory. There are still many unknowns about the schedule of his visit, but one thing that can be expected is Vance's appearance at the Pacific Space Base, a U.S. military base located in the northern part of the island. Originally, Vance's wife Usha and U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz were supposed to attend a cultural event in Greenland without Vance. However, Vance decided to join the trip earlier this week, angering many in Greenland and Denmark. His visit coincides with reports that 4 parties in Greenland are set to sign a coalition agreement to form a new government. The coalition will exclude the most pro-independence, American-friendly Nalarak party. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance will land in Greenland on Friday to visit one of the world's most remote posts. The Pacific Space Base lies between the Arctic Circle with little sunlight for 3 months of the year. But it is strategically important, a fact repeatedly emphasized by Donald Trump, who says he wants to take over the island.
America's most northerly runway. For more than 3/4 of the year, the remote Pituffik Air Base in northwestern Greenland is gripped by ice, with planes providing the only form of access. The vast, frozen landscape came to prominence during the Second World War, when Nazi Germany occupied Denmark, Greenland's colonial overlord. The US built listening posts and runways on the undefended territory to monitor the North Atlantic. Previously known as Thule, Pituffik is around 1,500 kilometers from Greenland's capital Nuuk, which itself is closer to Washington than Copenhagen. After the war, a treaty between the US and Denmark formally organized the arrangement. Denmark's NATO membership permitted America to operate a military station there, with the Cold War reinforcing its strategic significance. In 1968, a US B-52 bomber crashed in the sea near the base while carrying 4 thermonuclear bombs on a Cold War mission. That led to radioactive contamination. The US arrangement remained as Greenland became semi-autonomous. The base is now home to sophisticated radar systems that provide Washington with early warnings in case of attack, and it's home to the globe's most northerly deep-water port. Reports suggest that around 150 American Space Force and US Air Force members are based there, alongside Greenlanders and Danes. Whether that number increases as President Trump's interest in acquiring the island intensifies remains to be seen.
A powerful 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck central Myanmar on Friday, affecting neighboring countries. There is no official count of victims yet, but dozens remain trapped under collapsed buildings. The quake's epicenter was northwest of the town of Sagaing, with Mandalay, Myanmar's cultural and religious capital, experiencing severe tremors. Buildings, including a mosque and a bridge, collapsed, causing multiple casualties. In Bangkok, Thailand, a 30-story under-construction skyscraper collapsed, trapping at least 43 workers under its rubble. The Polish embassy in Bangkok was damaged by the earthquake, and all its staff was evacuated. Chinese cities near the Myanmar border also felt the quake, with reports of damage and injuries. Vladimir Putin and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan held a significant phone conversation on Friday, focusing on advancing bilateral cooperation in key areas, including energy projects and regional issues such as Ukraine and Syria. The two leaders discussed enhancing strategic energy initiatives and shoring up growing trade relations between their countries. A key topic was the possible renewal of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, originally brokered by Turkey and the UN in 2022, aimed at easing the export of food and fertilizers. Erdogan expressed Turkey's strong support for the initiative, noting that it could play a crucial role in peace efforts with Ukraine. Both leaders emphasized the importance of continuing dialogue between Russia and the US to resolve the war in Ukraine and stabilize relations. And that concludes World News at 2 p.m. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.